Hello, everybody. I'm back again. Great one. It's a great one this week. You know what I just realized as I started this? This is back to back sci fi. Completely on accident. Had a little adjustment of ye old reading schedule, so I think that's why it happened. I'll get into it. Today, the book it's not one I actually own, a physical copy of. It's on Kindle. It's The Three Body Problem. And I got to put the author a picture of the author up because I didn't write his name down because I'm a dope. I'm not gonna try to pretend to say it. I don't. It's sort of on the tip of my tongue, but I don't have it, so not gonna disrespect the man by saying a wrong name. Okay, where did I heard about this on the Sword and Laser podcast a while ago. Now I know the cover says it's a Netflix show. I don't own Netflix. I've never seen the show. I heard about it on Sword and Laser before. They do a thing where I'm trying to remember if they covered the book or they just brought it up on their newsreel segment situation. In any case, it sounded cool, so it stuck in the old memory. Cut to here recently, and I ended up getting that Kindle Unlimited thing, right? This isn't an ad. I wish that it were. I'll take that Amazon money if it's coming. But this isn't an ad. I just got a deal. You know they send you deals. It's like 3 months for some low price, right? It's a tremendous deal. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna snag it and read some books off of it, and see if it's worth it. Well, this one's one of the ones that came up. I have this one and a few others. I'm not gonna name them in case I don't get them finished in time. You know how slow I am. In any case, this one came up and I remembered it from that podcast, The Sword and Laser. So I snagged the bad boy and I started reading. Before I get into it, I'm going to give my rating in case you haven't read it and maybe you want to get a gist before you get spoiled on the rest of it. It is a 3 out of 5. But don't let that confuse you, right? It is a wonderful book. Wonderful. The thing is, it's very much science fiction, right? A big S in the science. And it can't help its flavor. I don't think it wants to help its flavor. It is what it is. But let me see. If you're really into romance, I don't think you want to sit here and talk about protons. You know what I mean? And it's not that he doesn't do a good job writing it or relating it to the characters, because it's one of the things he does wonderfully well. It's very expertly written. The thing is, it's what is it? If you want a hamburger, it does no good. It doesn't matter how good the spaghetti is. It's still spaghetti, right? So in that sense, it's like if you're into something else right now, it's too much its own flavor to pull the general all-encompassing audience in. So I can't recommend it to everyone. If you're really into Pride and Prejudice, just enjoy that for a bit, and keep this book in the back of your head in case you get inclined for some science fiction. But if you're into science fiction, right, you want some big S science fiction, you can come over here and take a big swig of this and be 100% happy. I know I was. It's very, very smart. Okay, so that's the rating. Now you know. The rest is sort of spoilery, so it's just how I do it. This book is very it's very quick. The writing is clean. It's imaginative. It's a mystery. It's high concept. All meshed together extremely wonderfully. I was a little bit surprised, to be honest. Normally, well, I guess, no offense to any individual names, but the newer science fiction, it don't land like I want it to. I feel like a lot of newer science fiction gets stuck in the weeds of current time, right? Be it woke, be it too much on our science. I don't get enough. Like, what did Arthur C. Clarke say, right? The you have to, if you're the writer, you have to imagine the future for the audience. It needs to be this fantastical thing, right? It should almost be unbelievable because you're throwing your mind way up there, right? That this one does it though. I have to keep my notes closer because I wrote in pencil, not in this pen, so I can't see it from a decent enough distance. He, it's not, yeah. So he manages to get the high concept some of these other ones want, and converse through it without being boring and without being too much in the present time, so to speak. Because, like, I know that science, or I'm aware of it, or it's happening now. And so it doesn't carry me somewhere new, right? He does. Um, like I keep saying concepts, and I'll bring it up more later, but they are deep. They're very sciency concepts, and you would think that lends itself to being boring, or for let's say a layman. I'm not saying I know everything, so he'll go deeper than let's say I could make a presentation on or anything to this effect. But he carries you there so well that you're never really lost. So even if let's say you haven't studied all this crap, I think you won't be lost and you'll have a good time. We start in what's the year? The year's 1967, and it's the Cultural Revolution in China. And the moment it hit that, I'm already impressed in a weird way. I like when stories grab settings that aren't typically used. I feel like it's like untapped potential, fertile ground. How many stories do we have that are sort of like Pride and Prejudice style? How many stories of, they came from Brooklyn, this kind of thing? I mean, it's well walked material, ground. But when you start going like, I'm going to pick Mongolia in the year 1998, I'm like, oh, well, I have no idea what happened in Mongolia in 1998. I don't know what that looks like. And therefore, I don't know how those things can play on my characters. And on we go. If it lands, which he does. So he picked the Cultural Revolution. Now, if you don't know, this time was heated, to say the least. I believe the communists took over China. Which it wasn't just China, but this is what he's picking. It seemed to hit all. It seemed to hit the world in a pretty solid wave. Communistic tendencies. Each country's had to deal with it in some way or the other. If you go too much into conspiracy theories, they'll say America's still dealing with it, but I'll leave that there, right? It's its own fun. On a different day, we'll do conspiracy theories. I'm sure they'll come up. In any case, the communist, there was this great fervor, right? Because we had a society of elite aristocrats and then like bunch of peasants. Well, it was like a peasant uprising, right? Communism spoke to those poor people, spoke to them of power and control, and maybe if you ran the world, things would be better. And that's what they did. And they would have these trials, like these kind of show trial situations where you're grabbing some rich guy who used to be in charge of the area and you're like telling him what time it is. That was very real. Very real. A lot of them didn't make it. Let's be honest. The trials got aggressive, we can say. But it was like the people were venting their anger out on these people. Some of them repented, some didn't. You know how it goes. Some ran, some didn't. But as it sort of expands, you start grabbing, I guess, anyone you think is better. So in the sense they would grab the intellectuals. And that's also real. A lot of intellectuals, writers, artists, essayists, physicists got dead in this Cultural Revolution. That realism, I feel, grounds this book in a kind of way that other sci-fis don't, I guess, have the benefit of, because if you're trying to go into the future, you lose that benefit. You have to find a different way to ground your story, right? But he has that benefit, this historical benefit. Everyone acting in this book acts appropriately for whatever age that they're in. Even at some points, there's citations because I read it on the Kindle here, and so I could push it, and there'd be like, this is what this scientific theory is. These are these actual intellectuals who were killed. So there's a groundedness. That's your first steps in this book are a very, very grounded, real situation. And it starts with the cultural revolutionists, right? They have young people, some of them are 15, 14, 17, caught up in this momentum. I believe one of them's like on a building waving a flag, getting shot at by some other people. And then another one comes up to try and, show their bravery, gets clipped. So he shows you, and then he personalizes it, right? Because we end up meeting a scientist who's getting the raw end of this stick, right? But he's got pride. So he's not going to sit there and say physics isn't physics. He's not going to sit there and say what they want him to say, which is, Marxism's the way, Marxism's the light and the truth, and, physics comes from him or whatever. However they wanted him to do it. He wasn't going to do it. And he argues with them. And this is, again, this is chapter 2 now. Let me see, what is he, we get an argument about the Big Bang Theory, about whether God is real, and not in a religious sense, but a scientific sense. The guy argues that he goes like, I see no scientific reason for or against a God. This is sort of in he's having an argument with these culturalist revolutionists. But what it ends up being is sort of like, a lot of other ones try this as well. I want to have a deeper conversation about these theories in science. But I don't want to just sit there and have the conversation, right? That's boring. But he weaves it into an argument between characters in a world that he's developing a history of our Earth, right? He's showcasing this. And in it, interweaving this scientific conversation. It's absolutely genius. And it carries throughout this whole book. Every time he wants the sort of deep conversation, it ends up being worked into a group of characters' conversation that's natural. So I feel like I'm watching such and such story unfold, but I'm also listening to this great, in-depth concept being, worked over, sort of. It's very genius. I tell you, a lot of authors want to do it this way. They try, they just they don't stick the landing. Either the concept's too much, that they can't break it down, or they lose their footing on the setting, right? If I have a bunch of scientists, they don't argue the way this physicist argued with former students who are now, torturing him. Because the student doesn't know, but the scientist does know. But even in that, I don't want a teacher-student relationship. It's adversarial, right? So I get that full weight of a debate. It's very, very genius. They eventually end up killing that guy because he had too much pride. He wasn't going to relent. So mad respect to him. But then it turns again, and our story keeps turning like this, like we're bouncing. It feels like we bounce around, but he carries you. It's now forgive me for any of these names if you happen to be Chinese or no Chinese. I'm not gonna get them right. It's Yi Wenji. We follow her, and I'll say this about the names: it's the only dip that I had in the book, and it's not anything that's the author's fault. It's just familiarity, right? I'm used to names like Frank, John, Rodrigo, right? And they it's sort of like a shortcut I've been taking, right? Which all readers take. Words that are familiar to you draw on familiar memories, and they help fill out the situation. He's used to these names, Yi Wen Ji. It's sort of odd to me when I look at it, the visual, the lettering, and so it doesn't elicit faces the way it would if I grew up with these names around me. It's just the way it is. So in a weird way, I don't. It took me longer to see the characters, if that makes sense. But it's not. I'm not going to blame his writing. It's. I think it's purely regional, right? We're just in the West. I guess we're just not used to these names. And maybe it's just me. Maybe I relied too much. But it's sort of how the letters look to me. It kind of threw me a little bit. But I will say by the end, and I guess if it were on a reread, I wouldn't have the issue too much. But just know that going in, it might be a bit of a bump. But don't let it hinder you. Okay, so we follow this. This is her father is the one who dies. We then have a 2 year jump, and she's in some kind of forest, right? She's the time made it so that now she's an outcast, but they didn't kill her. But she has to rehabilitate, and they're cutting down the woods, just hacking it down. Mm, the thing that caught me about sort of this section, and he does it a few times, and it's I guess the narration style. It's not first person, obviously. It's not. He takes on the form of a almost like a biographer in a weird way. So he knows all the facts, but it's how he's feeding them to us. He says at one point, what does he say? Half a century later, historians would all agree that this event in 1969 was the turning point in humankind's history. Not her father's death. She's in the woods. She gets sold down the river, right? He said after he mentions that, right, where we're following her, we care about her because her dad died. Now she got backstabbed. He then cuts away from that as as like let's say a frame. He cuts away to this sort of biography style. And again, it's the same as the time frame he picked. It's adding a realism. Biographies, whether you read them or watch them, sort of use that verbiage or that what is that? That tool because the story's moving along, and I can at any point jump back to reality and say, "This was a monumental moment. Remember it," and then continue with the story. But now, as the reader, I know the sphere of knowledge is out here as well, right? It just it's such a smart decision. He doesn't use it too often, but it again it grounds a story when you're talking too fantastical, whether that's a fantasy world like Gondor or high science, because a lot of the normal people won't know what's happening. It helps to ground your story and keep your reader on a solid footing, which he does the whole time. But it also adds stakes to the story. Because now I'm like, something about this lady affected sort of world history, right? That's a big event. It'd be the same as like if Napoleon had gone this way instead of that. The world's affected because this one person's affected, right? It's very, very, very smart. Um, from there, from the woods, getting backstabbed, you know, done dirty, as they say. She ends up at Red Coast 1. That's what they call it. It's sort of like some kind of facility with a satellite. And he feeds me an oddity, right? Not an eerie feeling. He starts to build an eerie feeling about this place. But she ends up big there, and again, not losing track of your setting, having your setting work for you. It's the Cultural Revolution, or sometime in the midst of it. So to get ahead in the world, you want to be political in some way. You don't want to be trapped, which is a lot of the other people in the sort of office see working at this outpost as a trap. What's her name? Our Wen Ji just wants to be left alone. So she's fine working here. She has no aspirations higher. They do. So they don't want to be seen as too proficient, or otherwise they'll say, you're too good, you have to stay there. Then they can't move up in the world. They also don't want to be seen as idiots. Otherwise they'll say, you're too stupid to run a facility. Why would I move you up in the world? So in this environment, she takes on more and more of the work, which they're happy to give her. She becomes proficient, which they're happy to have her be, because now everything runs well. They can take credit for it. And she's more and more entrenched in this area. Very excellent use of setting. All the elements of the time coalesce into making the story work better. It's genius. We then jump 40 years. It says 40 years or so. About 40 years, I think, is what it says. We jump from there to another person. Hold on. Yeah. Okay, so we jump. It's a time jump and a character jump. We leave her off to this side. Again, normally I would be upset. I want to know about this lady. I want to know about what's happening to her. But he doesn't give you time to be upset. We introduced to a Wang Miao. And before anything's built about him, right? We don't talk about what he does, if he has a wife and kids, where he lives, how he's grown up. Nothing about him, just a name. So I'm coming off of this before I have time almost to register. We have a new character. He's getting presented a kind of situation, right? So like a cop and another guy are asking him to go to a meeting with some generals. And I'm like, well, right? So in my brain, I think general and then world history. And it's enough to bridge me, right? So I'm going to give it a second here before I get too mad about losing the character I was dealing with. Very smart writing. Also, it doesn't take much sometimes for a reader. But to say 40 years have passed, I think readers feel the weight of that a little bit, right? It floats in the back of our head. Now, if the author can't keep up and something is done faster than takes 40 years, or he doesn't fill the 40 years up enough, then we feel the void, and then it's not working for you. But if you can fill it up appropriate, it does work. It gives you these extra elements you don't have. A lot of times stories, maybe like YA stories, are afraid of time. They try and get everything done sort of now. And they don't, let's say they don't let the person grow. You know, you can only do so much in a year, essentially. Only so much in a decade. Some things are decades in the making. Again, more realism. I absolutely love it. Our Meow ends up in kind of a mysterious situation. So again, before we can get mad, he serves us this other morsel that's too tasty. He's an intellectual. He ends up in a meeting with generals and CIA officers. So he's already thrown like, what's the problem that brings these sort of groups that are not favorable to each other in league, right? Well, what's the problem? The problem is some kind of a society. What's it called? Uh, where did I write that crap down? The frontiers of science. Okay, they've had high highly renowned scientists, physicists, these type of intellectuals be associated with this group and then mysteriously die more than what should be normal. So they want him, an intellectual, to sort of sneak his way in and sort of give him a window, some eyes on the inside. Because they could send an agent, but you can't fake being a scientist, right? The scientific community knows their people. They're like, I don't remember you at Harvard. I don't remember you at Yale. What papers have you published? That doesn't make any sense. You can't fake it, right? I need another one to go in there. So they send him in. Uh, 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 uh. Again, like before, where we're using arguments, just another example. We're talking about, in one instance, because he's trying to figure out where to start his investigation, so he goes and talks to the guy who liked the lady who just killed herself. Yeah. And he's talking about a particle accelerator, right? So I'm like, we into some science now. But he breaks it down by a pool table example. And he has the characters do this. He doesn't just dictate it to you, where you hit a pool ball in different spots, right? And it went in each time. And so he's like, so what's your point? I'm tired of hauling this pool table around. And he's like, his point was, that makes sense to you. You hit the ball and it went where you wanted it to go. He goes, now imagine if you start hitting particles and they don't do what you want them to do. He goes, that's essentially what's happening with particle accelerators now. And I'm like, that's kind of a genius way to feed that to me as a reader. And, it moves on in the story. It has this other effects, but he grabs these concepts and explains them to you this way. It's very, very smart. And it's for every concept. And it's not just that one. He brings up a lot of sciencey concepts and then feeds them out to you in these ways that you can really understand and that don't interfere with your story, right? It's very genius. Okay. Your boy Meow is a photographer on the side, and he's using it to calm down because he's trying to chew through how he's going to deal with these people, the situation he's in. So he goes and takes a bunch of pictures, and he develops them himself. And you're a photographer, he notices something on the page, on the print. And so when he looks at it, it's a number. It's this long number. And it's right in a dark spot where it's going to stand out. And in another picture, it's in a bright spot but dark. The numbers are dark, right? So it's always somewhere he can see it. And he's like, what the crap is this mess? Sorry about that. Had a bit of sneezy. He's like, what is this number? It's not, how does something get on the film that I made? And he does what normal people would do. He tests it on another roll. He has his wife shoot some pictures. He has his kid shoot some pictures. He tries some pictures on digital. He tries it multiple different ways. And it's only on his pictures. And it doesn't matter if it's digital or film. And it's not a mechanical error. But his wife takes some, then he snatches it and takes more, and then she does more. Right in the middle. They're gone for her. They're there for him, and they're, you know what I mean? So he starts to panic a little bit, right? It's just, he notices it's counting down, and he starts to freak out a little bit. It's very terror inducing in a weird way. I mean, what would you do if you just started seeing a countdown everywhere? And then I think it jumps from the photos to just his vision, just eyes open or closed. Doesn't matter where he looks. He goes and see an eye doctor, and the eye doctor's like, you're stressed out, bro. But he's aware, like, I can't tell too many people I'm seeing a countdown. They'll think I'm crazy. But again, the idea, and he presents it better also later, but I feel like that's a terror that would work if you were an intellectual, right? A common criminal, a person who would rob people or steal or hijack, carjack people or whatever, I don't think he'd be as affected seeing a countdown, right? They live more in the present, so to speak. So here's this countdown, and he's like, well, I'm seeing it, but so far I don't hurt, I'm not hungry, I'm going to let it ride a little bit, right? And that's what allows them to do criminal stuff. A lot of people were like, I can't do that, I'll get in trouble. A criminal goes, I don't see a cop around, who's going to get me in trouble? This way of thinking. He integrates even that concept into his story in a smart way. He goes and talks to this society, and the society tells him to stop his research into nano materials. He asks them what the countdown is. He doesn't get an answer. He asks them, will it stop? He doesn't get an answer. Just flatly, stop your research. He stops his research for a repair or something. Numbers go away. And it builds so well, this sort of mystery. This mystery starts propelling the story in such a great way. He also uses a cosmic microwave background, I guess the sort of the ambient noise of the universe, as a way to further prove to the guy that whoever they are, they have this hyper ability, right? But I like the idea that we're bringing cosmic microwave background into a story, right? We're talking about cosmic microwave backgrounds. Again, big ass science fiction, bro. We then enter, and again, every bounce you're just pulled through. The mystery now draws you. You almost start to forget about the first lady, Wen Ji. Wen Jai. What was her name? Wen Jai. You almost start to forget about her because you're so interested in what's happening sort of in the present. So he starts this video game called 3 Body. And he doesn't get stuck in how the game sort of functions or the graphics or anything to this effect. But he doesn't lose that it's 1960 whatever or whatever the year is supposed to be. Whatever year it is. It's still not like modern Unreal Engine whatever. So it's not clean looking. He even mentions that because he's like, the point isn't that even our scientist guy feels that there's some underlying intelligence, some grand point being made that makes it worthy of his attention. So because it's worthy of his attention, it's worthy of ours. And it's over multiple chapters, right? But what he's using this game for, and again, rather than just talk about a scientific concept, He's an author. You have a book. You're supposed to walk me through it, the same as you'd walk me through Gondor or walk me through, some historical event. I should feel like I'm there and living it, not just in class being dictated to, right? Someone's not up on a podium pontificating. I'm living the thing. That's what he does with this game. He uses this game to describe to you sort of an astrological, what did we say, situation. Here's a planet where none of the rules work. So the sun is supposed to rise and set. Here, the sun can sometimes rise and sometimes not. Sometimes it's hot, and sometimes it's bitter cold, and sometimes the night doesn't end, and sometimes everything's pleasant. And the game's trying to make you, the player, figure out why. And what it ends up being is the description of a solar system somewhere out in space with three suns, a three-body problem, right? So that sometimes only the one sun is near you, and sometimes two. Sometimes all three come and just roast everyone down. And he's trying to describe how a society, not society, what would evolution do on that planet, right? That's in this particular setup. How would evolution deal with that? Because evolution gave us humans, so evolution would work on other planets. So we have people, and they're showing humans, but you clearly get the sense that we're now, well, you don't, at first you don't. Again, he feeds you the concepts well enough, but by the end you realize that these aren't humans, that they're placeholders so that we can understand what's happening. But they'll dehydrate themselves. They'll just be little skins of fiber so that the heat doesn't kill everyone. And then they'll rehydrate when it's good times, and then try and move their society forward and wash, rinse, repeat till they get exterminated, and then they'll try again, building off knowledge left from the last. On and on we go. We even get to a point in there where they make like a human computer using white and black flags and people facing each other. It's a great description of how sort of a computer might work internally. Not, you don't think about it much, but it's this great concept of a living computer. And if that were possible, and what would happen? And how would people develop? This kind of thing. It's very, very, very cool. I'm trying to think of another book I think has done this, not better, but attempted it all. Normally they show astrology from far away, right? We see the planet and we see this action. He puts us on the planet and then on the action that's happening there. Very, very wonderful. I'm going to sort of talk about that. And again, he integrates this into his story because, hold on, I don't want to miss any little bits before I go on. We then reintroduce our Wenji, and we cut back to when she was younger. Now we're not with our Meow guy. She's working at a Red Base, that whatever that facility was, she's working there, and this is sort of when it becomes apparent of what we're dealing with. And then sort of the strings start coming together. And again, it's intercut with the chapters of the other one. So it's not the way I'm saying it, but I'm just giving you how it ends up working so well. They get wind because it's sort of the Cold War era. And everyone's spying on everyone. Someone gets wind in China that America is reaching out to aliens. Not that aliens exist, not that they've made contact, just the action alone reaching out. And they start internally thinking, which again I think would be natural. and natural to the sort of the suspicions of the time, where they're like, look, there's no sign of any aliens, but we can't have the Americans talk to the aliens first. They'll badmouth us. They'll only give their side of the story. Or, what worse, they won't tell anyone they're talking to aliens, and they'll be able to technologically move up so fast that they'll pass everyone else by. So, we as China need to find some way to communicate with these not as of yet found or even known to be in existence aliens. So that's what this whole base was. It's trying to send out beams of information to talk to aliens, if any aliens are there, and then to have that advantage over the Americans. That if we contact them first, then we can make them like us more than America, or we can, monopolize that communication and advance ourselves and win, right? I'm like, it's genius. It wouldn't have worked in another time. I don't think it would have worked in our age now. We're not that antagonistic towards each other. The crap would have gone right to the internet, and then everyone would have spazzed out a different way. If you go too far back, right, then they don't have satellites, and how are they going to make the communication anyway? It wouldn't work in sort of the 1800s. It wouldn't work in 2023. Absolute genius time to set this up, right in the Cold War. And so you start to see why she's doing what she's doing. So she's been there a long time. She can do what she wants. She's the most technically proficient. She comes up with an idea to feed the beam of information into the sun and have it be an amplifier, to use the sun's energy to amplify it out. Again, it goes into some science on how that works. Very slick. And she does this, right? Sort of without anyone's permission. She does this. And she receives a message back. And this is another thing he does, which I'm going to mention here, but it happens throughout the book, where some stories can build a thing, and then the payoff's the end of the book. Some stories can give a payoff, that by the time you get to that payoff, we've now stepped over it and we're on this other thing, right? If you do it too much or you do it wrong, I feel like my time is wasted. Like, everything doesn't matter in the end. But if you do it right, it just gives speed to your story, because I'm getting the payoff and then payoff propelled kind of thing. So that's what he does here as well, where we take all this time to try and do the one to see if this sun thing works. By the time it does, another thing happens that makes it so that we don't care about that as much anymore, and we're on this new thing. Again, happens in life a lot, right? You maybe failed a test, or you lost your job, or you were fired, or something to this effect. And I'm like, oh, that sucks, and it's your whole day. Then you get home, and they're like, you want a new car, and you're like, forget about that bad stuff. Let me think about this good stuff. Or vice versa, right? It feels realistic, this kind of way. I say realism a lot because, again, he's tackling sort of high-minded science theories, and then he tackles aliens. So you have a chance for your story to just drift off into Never Never Land, but it never does. She sends it, and 8 years later, she gets a return message. I believe that's how it went. And the message is, what is it? Did I write it down? Something to the effect of, don't respond. Don't respond. We'll conquer you. We'll destroy you. Do not respond. Right? And I'm like, oh, that's kind of... It's not the message you think you're getting. One, you're not thinking you're getting a message back in English. So that tells you something about them. But two, you don't think you're getting a warning. Don't come this way. And here's where more of the genius of his world just sort of smashes together. She's seen the raw end of humanity a lot. She saw, the Cultural Revolution was intense. People killing each other. Add to it this mass deforestation, this wanton destruction. Um, Again, news is not bringing you good news. Starvations, wars, all the stuff that happened in the 60s. This sort of this, but from an unpleasant angle, right? But that root of where she started. She doesn't see, let's say, all the good in humanity. She wasn't spending a lot of times when she's young going to the ballpark. There's not a lot of optimism there. So you have this person who justifiably now has a pessimistic view of Earth, who then receives this message and has the ability to send a message back, right? And from her perspective, this advanced alien civilization could and probably will come and destroy humanity. But she doesn't see that as so bad a thing. Either some bits will survive or fight back hard enough or maybe be enslaved or maybe it's wiped out completely. Another theory is that they'd be wiped out completely, but everything else would go on, right? All the birds, all the trees, all of nature. And maybe that's what the earth deserves, right? He has all of these arguments fleshed out through characters one way or the other. All in line with his story, all moved forward because what she does is sends back a message. And the message says, "Come here, I will help you conquer this world. Our civilization is no longer capable of solving its own problems. We need your force to intervene." So like she lit the fuse. She does not care. Humanity hadn't given her enough reasons to care. And again, a normal, well-adjusted, maybe let's say scientist would maybe have shared the information. If it happened in America, he had told his professor. All these other things might have happened. All these other story elements. But it wouldn't give us the outcome we want. So he has to find the element that gives him the outcome he's wanting. And it's this person raised in the Cultural Revolution of China. It's genius in like 9 different ways. I absolutely love it. Then and again, he's unafraid. This man is unafraid. Because rather than just say, the aliens are coming, and that'd be a good way to end it, or show the aliens here, he sends us there. He sends us across the galaxy to these aliens, who our 3-body has sort of been setting us up. It's been an analogy for how they sort of function, but it's not a description. Now he's sort of putting us where they are. And he walks us through how they would deal with this message and what they're doing and all these more high science, more concepts. But they have a fear of us as well. They have a planet this time might be ticking. Because at some point, the 3 suns are just one of them's going to fly too close to this planet and eat it. Which would happen to the other ones. Of our what does he call them? He calls them trisolarians. God, I love the name. He calls them trisolarians. And we now have all the buildup of those chapters of the game serving this chapter of the real. It's wonderfully written, people. It absolutely is. And then it starts to explain a lot of what had been happening has been these aliens' fault, and then we get a large discussion of quantum entanglement. Right? They send 2 probes that are quantumly entangled with 2 other probes so that there can be instant communication and this and that. Right? So again, the concepts never end. And then these aliens are coming, and now that's the war we're dealing with. And now we're in this new world of aliens existing, but no one knowing, and them coming as a problem. Right? That's sort of how it ends. And it doesn't feel, like some are like, I wanted the aliens to come. I never get that feeling. I want this other resolution. I thoroughly enjoy the resolution I have because what this really was in a lot of ways was a mystery. And the mystery solved. That the solved mystery doesn't help the real problem is a different book, which I think he has a sequel, which I am definitely going to try and read. But that was the three body problem. It's I have no idea how the show goes. I don't know if the show goes like this. I think there's a Chinese version I want to check out. Maybe I will. I'm not sure. But the book is it's spectacular. Spectacular. I'm just hitting you with some of the concepts and some of the things I like about it. But it feeds it out to you so well. It's absolutely spectacular. And I'm actually looking forward to the second one. Highly. I think it's 3 or 4 he's into now. If the second one's this good, I might actually buy the third one. Just not on discount, people. Full price. That's what I'm thinking. All right. I don't know how long this one was because I had to pause it halfway through, but let's go to our ads. I think I should explain this page I'm showing you. It's the author page on Amazon. That's where you should be able to find my books. So it should look like this. Go check it out and buy one of my books. This was such an enjoyable book, people. I really do recommend it if you're into science fiction. But again, some of the stuff might not appeal if you're not in the mood. If you don't want spaghetti, you know, and you want to, if you want a hamburger and you get spaghetti, you'll be upsetty spaghetti. So wait till you're in the mood and then go and enjoy this book. Again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sitting this long, listen to me babble. I'm really enjoying these videos. They're very fun. All right, people. Talk to you next week. I'm pretty sure next week won't be sci-fi, but I'm not making any promises, right? No promises. Thank you.